The billionaire CEO kneels, handcuffed, his heart hammering in his chest. Before him, a child stands motionless, gazing up at the man with wide, unblinking eyes. The air is heavy with the sound of muffled breathing, the tension palpable, stretching between them like a thick, suffocating veil. His empire, once vast and unstoppable, now lies in ruins. The man's mind races through a million images, each one an unraveling thread of his downfall. Each decision, each sacrifice, all now brought to this moment of tragic irony. This child, once the center of his world, is now a reflection of everything he has lost. He thought his power could protect them, that his empire could shield him from any harm. But here he is, powerless, kneeling before the very person he promised to protect above all else. His face, once cold and determined, now contorts in anguish, tears welling up as he silently pleads for redemption, for a chance to undo what he had done. The camera lingers on the child's expression, innocent yet filled with an unspoken understanding, a silent judgment that cuts deeper than any words could. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. The words echo, reverberating in the man's chest, the weight of them almost too much to bear. In this moment, he sees the enormity of his failure, and for the first time, he realizes the cost of everything he's sacrificed. The CEO's eyes flit to the desk, his gaze unfocused, as if seeking refuge in the objects that once defined his power. A half-empty glass of whiskey sits in front of him, the amber liquid reflecting the dim light above. But even that offer of solace cannot calm the storm inside him. His hands tremble as he reaches for the glass, fingers brushing the rim, yet he withdraws before he can take a sip. It's no use. He tries to steady his breath, but the weight of everything is suffocating. The voice from the corner of the room cuts through the silence, sharp and accusing. It's not a voice that belonged to the child, but one from his past, the one who had been the driving force behind his rise. The one who once stood beside him, helping him build the empire that now crumbles to dust. The words echo in his mind. You thought you could control everything, but you were never in control. How many times had he heard them before? Too many to count. But now, they feel like a punch in the gut. There is no escaping the truth. Everything he has worked for, everything he thought he controlled, was never truly his. It was always a fragile illusion. His thoughts flicker to the child again, still standing, observing. The child who had grown up with the knowledge that their parent had failed, that the promises made could not withstand the test of time. The CEO swallows hard, his throat tightening. He has lost everything, and the empire he thought would define his legacy will be nothing more than a hollow monument to failure. It is here in this broken moment that the gravity of his decisions, of his arrogance, becomes undeniable. There is no way to undo the damage. There is no redemption. The silence is broken by the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway outside the office. It's a sound that the billionaire once would have ignored, dismissing it as background noise. But now, each step feels like a reminder of the world moving on without him. He sits up straighter, instinctively, as if trying to regain some sense of control. His mind races, but he can't outrun the crushing sense of inevitability that lingers in the air. His thoughts drift back to his rise, to the sleepless nights spent building his empire from the ground up, the sacrifices made along the way. Friends, family, relationships, they were all collateral damage in his quest for power. Each time he told himself that it was worth it, that the ends justified the means. But now, in this dark office, alone, and facing the consequences, he wonders if those sacrifices were truly worth anything at all. His mind flickers to moments of joy, a child's first steps, a birthday shared with loved ones, fleeting memories of a time before the empire took everything. He tries to push them away, but they linger, bittersweet and sharp. The child stands there motionless, like a mirror reflecting the failure he refuses to acknowledge. The once unshakable CEO is now broken, and he is painfully aware that there is no going back. There is no redemption for a man who has lost everything, who never took the time to see what truly mattered. As the footsteps grow louder, the CEO's mind flashes back to a moment in time when he was truly in control, when he believed he could shape the world to his will. But now, that sense of control is a distant memory. A sudden noise jolts him from his thoughts. A faint knock on the door. It's soft, tentative, but it feels like the sound of the world outside intruding on his misery. The billionaire remains frozen for a moment, his heart racing. The knock comes again, louder this time. He doesn't want to face anyone, doesn't want to deal with the inevitable questions, the accusation. He wants to stay in this dark cocoon, where he doesn't have to confront the collapse of his empire, the wreckage of his decisions. But he knows he can't hide forever. The child remains in the corner of the room, silent, unblinking. It is as if the child is the last piece of what remains of the billionaire's once powerful life, now a mere observer of the ruins. The billionaire slowly rises from his chair, his movements slow and deliberate. As he crosses the room toward the door, he feels the weight of every step. Each one is a reminder of how far he has fallen. He reaches the door, his hand hovering over the handle, hesitating for just a moment. When he opens the door, a flood of light pours into the room, momentarily blinding him. Standing on the other side of the door is a figure, someone from his past, someone who once stood beside him at the height of his success. But now, all that remains between them is distance, both emotional and physical. The figure looks at him, eyes full of pity, a look the billionaire has seen far too many times. He wants to scream, to lash out, but instead, he takes a deep breath, stepping aside to allow the figure to enter. The figure steps into the room, and the door slowly shuts behind them with a soft click. For a moment, neither speaks. The silence hangs heavy, thick with years of unspoken words and unresolved tension. The figure looks around the room, taking in the opulence, the sleekness of the once glorious office, now a shell of what it used to be. The billionaire watches, waiting for the inevitable judgment, the questions that are sure to come. But instead the figure simply says, "I never thought it would end like this." There is no anger, no accusations, only an empty sadness in their voice. The billionaire swallows hard, his throat tight. He wants to explain, wants to justify his actions, but the words catch in his throat. How do you explain a lifetime of choices that led to this moment of utter collapse? He remains silent, his gaze falling to the floor, unable to meet the other person's eyes. The silence lingers between them, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. The child, still standing in the corner, watches this exchange, the weight of the situation settling over them. It is a moment of reckoning, not just for the billionaire, but for everyone involved. The empire he built is gone. And now, there is nothing left but the ruins of his choices. The CEO had grown up in the shadows of his father's legacy, but he never let that define him. He swore he would never make the same mistakes, that his rise would be different. The early years were filled with a drive so intense, it burned through every obstacle. He remembered the hunger to escape the cycle of failure that had plagued his family. As a boy, he watched his father, a man who once commanded respect, fail again and again. The debt piled up, creditors came knocking, and his mother grew quieter with each passing day. His father's fall from grace was more than a lesson. It was a wound that would never heal. He swore to himself, in the silent hours of the night, that he would never let that be his story. But as he stood now, in the darkened office, the weight of those early promises felt suffocating. The child who stood in the corner, now older, filled with ambition and resentment, looked up at him with eyes that were no longer full of trust, but judgment. The CEO could feel the weight of that look, like an anchor pulling him back into the past. He had built the empire, and yet, standing there, he was just like his father, broken, fragile, and alone. The empire he had crafted was as hollow as the promises he had made to himself. He had built something powerful, yes, but at what cost? The legacy he had tried so hard to outrun had caught up with him, and now there was no escaping it. As the young woman steps into the boardroom, her heart races with anticipation and fear. She's been here before, on the sidelines, watching men in suits make decisions that affected her life. But today, things will be different. Today, she will sit at the table. She had earned her place against all odds, despite the obstacles and the skepticism that surrounded her. But as she walks into the sleek high-rise room, she can feel the eyes of the men already dismissing her. They sit around the large oval table, their suits a shade of gray that blends into the cold corporate environment. She feels their gaze, sharp and calculating, as they take note of her presence. The room smells of expensive leather and polished wood, but there's a chill in the air, as if her very presence disrupts the sterile order of this place. Her hand trembles slightly as she adjusts her blazer, and for a moment, doubt creeps in. But she forces it down, standing tall and unwavering. She's here to make her mark, and nothing, no judgment, no sideways glances, will stop her. As the conversation begins, her voice cuts through the room, clear and confident. She knows what she's doing. She will not be ignored. But there's an undercurrent of tension in the room. The men may pretend to listen, but they are calculating her every move, weighing her against the expectations they have of a woman in this space. She won't back down. Not now. Not ever. The boy's world was one of silence and tension, the quiet ache of a mother's struggle never far from his mind. He sat on the steps of the small store, watching the passing cars and pedestrians, feeling the weight of his mother's words. "Well, make it, just hang on." But he knew the truth. Her eyes were hollow, her voice empty with the weight of all the dreams she had sacrificed. He could see it in the way she stood outside the store, pleading with the owner for a job, her hands wringing the fabric of her coat as she spoke. He could hear her voice crack as she begged, her words becoming desperate. And all the while, he sat in silence, feeling like a burden. His own heart burned with the desire to protect her, to be strong for her. But what could a boy do? What could he offer? He watched as she was turned away, again and again, always with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Each rejection was a stone in the pile of her unspoken disappointments. The boy swore then, silently, to himself. He would never be in this position. He would never be the one asking for help, never be the one ignored. He would make something of himself, for both of them. But the pain, the deep ache of watching his mother lose, day after day, weighed heavily on him. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Years later, as he stood at the precipice of his career, the echoes of his past still haunted him. Every decision he made was colored by that early promise, to never end up like his father, to never beg for survival. He had built his empire, brick by brick, never looking back. But as his company grew, so did the cost. The sleepless nights blurred into one another. The faces of people who had come and gone in his life faded into ghosts. He had made enemies, sacrificed friendships, and strained his relationships. Success, he learned, came at a price. And that price was steep. He had crossed lines he never thought he would, made choices he swore he would never make. But there was no turning back now. He had become the thing he feared most, the man who would do anything to succeed. He stood alone in his penthouse office, staring out at the city below, the glow of the skyline reminding him of what he had built. But as the lights flickered in the distance, he saw the emptiness beneath it all. The empire was a fortress, yes, but it was one that had cost him his soul. The child he had left behind, the promises he made, were now just distant memories. The woman who once stood beside him was now nothing more than a whisper in the background. And in that moment, he realized that what he had built could just as easily come crashing down. In the end, everything he had worked for felt hollow. His empire, once a symbol of his triumph, now stood as a reminder of his failures. The child who had once looked up to him with admiration was now a stranger, someone he couldn't even reach. And as he looked back on it all, the question lingered. Was it worth it? The late nights, the betrayals, the sacrifices, was any of it worth the loneliness? He couldn't help but wonder if he had chosen the wrong path. His success had come at the expense of everything he once held dear, everything that mattered. And yet, as much as he regretted the cost, he knew he couldn't change it. He had already crossed too many lines. His empire was too big, too important. The people who depended on him, the millions who relied on his success, demanded that he keep pushing forward. So he did. But as he sat in his office, alone, watching the city pulse below, he realized that no matter how many deals he closed, no matter how many businesses he acquired, there would always be a piece of him that was lost. And it was a piece he could never get back. The CEO's journey to build his empire began with relentless energy and sleepless nights. Every day was a battle against time and doubt. His office was a small, cramped space, lit only by the flickering glow of a desk lamp. Friends drifted away, unable to keep pace with his obsession. Birthdays were missed, promises broken. He sacrificed relationships for success, believing the empire would fill the void. But as deals closed and the business grew, he felt an increasing loneliness that gnawed at his spirit. His victories were hollow, achievements measured in contracts and numbers, not happiness. He often found himself staring at the skyline through the window, wondering if the cost was worth it. Each triumph came with a price, an eroding connection with those who once mattered most. His passion burned bright, but threatened to consume everything in its path. This was the price of ambition, growth born of sacrifice, and the constant fear that everything might unravel. The young woman, too, felt the sting of sacrifice as she climbed the ladder of success. Late nights in boardrooms replaced social dinners and quiet weekends. Every presentation was a test, every negotiation a battlefield. Investors were skeptical, and allies often vanished when the stakes grew high. She juggled ambition with loneliness, the tension clear in her posture and expression. Behind her confident facade was a constant battle to prove she belonged. Friends and lovers became casualties of her drive. Yet in every setback she found fuel to push harder. Her vision was clear, to claim a place where no one expected her to stand. But with every win, the cost grew steeper, and the question lingered, was this relentless pursuit worth the pain it caused? The empire she was building demanded everything, and she was determined to give it. One birthday passed without celebration. The CEO watched a video message from his child on his phone, the smile frozen in pixels, a painful reminder of absence. The laughter, the warmth, all moments had traded for deals and meetings. His heart ached with regret. Ambition had cost him the irreplaceable, time with loved ones. He longed to rewind, to reclaim those fleeting moments. But the demands of his growing empire chained him to a relentless cycle. Success felt empty without those personal connections. His victory was a silent, lonely one, marked by the quiet glow of a screen and the echo of a child's laugh fading into the past. He realized too late that no amount of wealth could replace those lost years. The young woman stood on a rooftop terrace, the city stretching beneath her like a living map of dreams and sacrifices. Deals were won, partnerships forged, but the victories felt hollow. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the weight of loneliness. She had conquered boardrooms but lost something more vital: connection. The empty skyline mirrored the emptiness inside her. She wondered, in quiet moments, what it all meant if no one was there to share it. The price of power was steep, and she bore it alone. Her ambition had propelled her forward, but also built walls around her heart. In the cold night air, she faced the daunting question: was the empire she was building worth the solitude it demanded? The answer was unclear, but she pressed on, driven by a fire that refused to be quenched. Both the CEO and the young woman faced moments that tested their resolve. He watched his empire's foundation tremble under the strain of relentless pressure and betrayal. Every step forward felt fragile, like walking on thin ice. She uncovered a mentor's deceit, a crushing blow that shattered trust and threatened everything she had built. The sting of betrayal cut deep, forcing her to confront the harsh reality of corporate power. Their journeys converged in struggle and loss, each learning that success demanded sacrifices that sometimes felt unbearable. Yet through the pain, they found a fierce determination. Even as their worlds cracked, neither was ready to surrender. Their rise came with cost: sleepless nights, broken promises, and the ever-present fear that all could fall apart. But giving up was never an option. This was their climb, no matter the price. The CEO's world shattered in an instant. What he believed was his alone, the empire he built from the ground up, was revealed to be a joint creation, a business co-founded by his estranged sibling. The news hit like a bombshell, twisting through his mind and heart. Every victory, every decision, now cast in shadow. The revelation fractured his identity, making him question what had truly been his. The sibling's face loomed in his memories. Once a partner, now a rival with a claim to the empire. Betrayal was a bitter taste on his tongue, but worse was the feeling of having been deceived by blood. Trust shattered, alliances crumbled. The foundation of his success, once thought solid, now felt like quicksand beneath his feet. The man who built an empire was now a stranger in his own kingdom, grappling with the truth that the throne he fought for was never fully his. His legacy, carefully constructed, began to unravel, piece by fragile piece, leaving a hollow ache where pride once stood. Meanwhile, the young woman uncovered a devastating betrayal of her own. Her trusted mentor, a figure who once guided her through the maze of corporate battles, was siphoning funds from her company. The discovery left her reeling, a profound sense of violation burning deep inside. Every lesson, every moment of trust, now tainted by deceit. She felt the weight of being alone in a world built on fragile alliances. The betrayal was not just financial, it was personal, cutting into the core of her belief in loyalty and integrity. The empire she had fought so hard to build suddenly felt unstable, as if built on sand. But she refused to crumble. Instead, she channeled her pain into fierce resolve, vowing to reclaim control and expose the treachery. This was a pivotal moment, one that would redefine her path and force her to confront the darker realities of power. The CEO faced another crushing blow, a diagnosis that no one could have anticipated. A terminal illness, revealed in cold, clinical terms by a doctor whose expression was too gentle for the gravity of the news. The knowledge shattered the illusion of control he clung to so desperately. His time was limited, and yet the empire he had fought for demanded his full attention. He could not share the truth. He had to protect his team, his family, and the legacy that now felt fragile. The illness was a secret burden, a ticking clock shadowing every decision, every meeting. He wrestled with despair and determination, knowing the end was near but refusing to surrender. The CEO was a man caught between worlds, one of ruthless ambition and one of human fragility. His greatest battle was no longer with competitors or corporate rivals, but with the relentless march of time itself. At the same time, the young woman's world began to unravel under mounting legal challenges. Investors questioned her leadership, whispers of instability spread like wildfire. The pressure was relentless, and the empire she had built started to fracture before her eyes. Every day brought new obstacles, new betrayals. She struggled to hold on to her vision while fighting battles on multiple fronts. The weight of expectation was crushing, and the fear of failure grew palpable. Yet, amid the chaos, she refused to give in. Her resolve hardened, her focus sharpened. This was not just about business anymore. It was about survival, about reclaiming what was hers by right. The empire she had poured her heart into was at a crossroads, and she stood at its center, ready to fight or fall. Both the CEO and the young woman found themselves isolated in their respective boardrooms, clutching onto crumbling dreams. The revelations had shaken the foundations of everything they had fought for. The empire was no longer a symbol of triumph, but a fragile monument to sacrifice and betrayal. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the unspoken realization that their worlds were breaking apart. Yet, despite the despair, a flicker of defiance remained. They both understood that this collapse was not the end, but a painful transformation. Their journeys had brought them here to the edge of ruin, but also to the brink of something new. The empire they once knew was gone, but what lay ahead was uncertain, a test of resilience, courage, and the will to rebuild from the ashes. The boardroom was thick with tension, every eye locked on the CEO as he prepared to face the ultimate reckoning. The vote that would decide the fate of his empire hung in the air, a silent storm threatening to destroy all he had built. He could feel the weight of years, sacrifices, betrayals, victories, pressing down on him. This was more than business. It was legacy versus oblivion. The room's cold light reflected off polished surfaces, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for him like ghosts of the past. He steadied his breath, knowing that every word he spoke could either save or shatter the world he had fought for. Around the table, faces masked skepticism and doubt, but some eyes held flickers of hope. He knew that this moment was irreversible, the culmination of every choice he had ever made. No room remained for regret or hesitation. He had to rise, not just as a CEO, but as a man confronting his own failures and seeking redemption. The silence broke with his voice, steady but heavy with emotion, signaling the beginning of a turning point that would echo far beyond this room. Across town, the young woman stood before her board, the weight of history and expectation heavy on her shoulders. The room buzzed with whispered doubts and unspoken fears, but she met every gaze with unwavering strength. Her voice was clear and resolute as she laid out her vision, not just for survival but for resurgence. She spoke of rebuilding trust, of harnessing pain as fuel for transformation. The stakes had never been higher. This was a moment to prove her worth beyond titles and profits. Every word carried the fierce fire of someone who had fought too hard to surrender now. The boardroom's polished surfaces and glass walls reflected the cold, calculating world she navigated, but her eyes shone with defiance and hope. The silence that followed her speech was heavy, pregnant with possibility. She knew that this vote could either break or remake her empire. It was a crucible, and she stood ready to face it head-on. The CEO's final speech was a raw, unfiltered confession of failure and hope. He acknowledged the mistakes, the lost moments, and the cost of ambition. His voice cracked at times, but the honesty was undeniable. He spoke not just to the board, but to his own heart, seeking forgiveness and a chance to rebuild. He reminded everyone why they started: the vision, the passion, the promise. As he spoke, he saw old allies soften, adversaries reconsider. The room's cold air seemed to warm with the flicker of renewed faith. It was a plea not for mercy, but for a new beginning. The speech marked the fragile peak of a journey fraught with pain and sacrifice. The empire's fate now rested in the hands of those gathered, but the CEO had done everything he could to tip the scales. His legacy, once on the brink, now held a glimmer of salvation. In a quiet moment away from the boardroom, the CEO shared a silent embrace with his daughter. No words were needed. The hug spoke volumes: regret, love, forgiveness. It was a fragile bridge over the chasm that ambition had carved between them. The weight of their shared history hung in the air, heavy but healing. In that embrace lay a promise that despite the empire's fragility, their bond would endure. The moment was brief but profound, a rare sanctuary of warmth amid the storm. It reminded the CEO of what truly mattered, what no empire could replace. It was a testament to the personal sacrifices hidden beneath corporate battles. This silent connection was a turning point, a reminder that legacy is more than business. It is love, redemption, and hope. The young woman confronted her mentor one last time, standing tall despite the storm of betrayal. Her words were sharp, cutting through years of manipulation and lies. She revealed the truth to those who mattered, dismantling the power her mentor once held. It was a moment of reckoning, painful but necessary. Though she held the power to destroy her empire entirely, she chose a different path, stepping away. It was a sacrifice born not of weakness but of strength. She sought to reclaim herself beyond the shadows of betrayal and ambition. The choice was deeply personal, marking a new chapter where power would no longer define her worth. Walking away was her ultimate act of control, a declaration that some battles are won not by conquest, but by courage to let go. The CEO watched as his empire quietly dissolved, the skyscrapers he once ruled seeming smaller each day. But amidst the ruins, something unexpected grew. His relationship with his daughter blossomed into a fragile yet resilient bond. The years of absence, regret, and silence gave way to tentative conversations and small moments of laughter. He realized that what he had lost in power, he was slowly gaining in love. The empire's collapse had stripped away the illusions of grandeur and forced him to confront what truly mattered. His daughter was no longer just a symbol of the past, but a beacon for his future. Though the road ahead was uncertain, he found solace in their connection. Success, he finally understood, was not measured in wealth or titles, but in the hearts we touch and the bonds we mend. His legacy, once a fortress of steel and glass, was now rooted in something far more human: redemption and love. The young woman, now distanced from the corporate battlefield, found peace in an unexpected place. She left behind the endless boardroom battles and hollow victories, seeking fulfillment beyond the empire's walls. In quiet moments of reflection, she embraced a new identity, one not defined by power or money, but by self-discovery and resilience. She cultivated relationships rooted in authenticity, cherishing the freedom to make choices without the weight of expectation. Though the path was uncertain, it was hers alone, and that ownership brought profound relief. Her empire may have crumbled, but what she gained was infinitely more valuable: a reclaimed self and a life lived on her own terms. It was a quiet triumph, born of courage and surrender, signaling the start of a new chapter filled with possibility and peace. The CEO returned to the towering headquarters of his once mighty empire, walking slowly through its empty halls. Each step echoed with memories, victories, losses, and the relentless pursuit of power. But now, his gaze was softer, less burdened. He saw his reflection in the glass walls, a man transformed by loss and love. In the main boardroom sat his daughter, occupying the same chair he once held. She looked up, eyes steady, ready to lead with her own vision. A silent understanding passed between them, a passing of the torch, an unspoken promise to build differently. He left the building that day, not as a conqueror, but as a father who had finally found peace in letting go. The empire's future was in new hands, and with it came hope, fragile but real. The young woman found new allies among former rivals and competitors, building relationships grounded in respect rather than conquest. Her smile was genuine now, free from the sharp edge of ambition's loneliness. She had crafted a new life, one that balanced success with meaning. The empire she once desired had faded into the background, replaced by a network of support, friendship, and shared purpose. This was her true legacy, not the battles won or companies acquired, but the person she had become. In this chapter, she embraced vulnerability as strength and collaboration as power. The cold walls of the boardroom were behind her now, replaced by the warmth of human connection. It was a victory far greater than any she had fought for in the past. Both the CEO and the young woman stood alone, yet resolute in the quiet moments after the storm. They had lost much, but the losses carved out space for something deeper: integrity, wisdom, and clarity. The empires they once ruled had crumbled, but what remained was far more enduring: their true selves. They had faced betrayal, pain, and isolation, but emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. This was not an end, but a new beginning. The lessons learned would guide them as they stepped forward into unknown futures, carrying the scars and the strength of their journeys. Their stories were no longer about power or conquest, but about resilience, love, and the courage to rebuild. It was a quiet victory, one without fanfare, but with profound meaning. The CEO stands alone before a massive mirror, the weight of years etched into the lines on his face. He studies his reflection, a man transformed by loss, love, and lessons learned. Behind him, the city's night sky bursts with fireworks, brilliant explosions of color illuminating the darkness. The noise outside contrasts with the stillness within, a paradox of celebration and quiet reflection. His eyes soften as he takes in the man staring back, no longer defined by empire or power, but by the courage to face himself. The past clings like a shadow, but the future stretches wide open, full of uncertain promise. In this moment of solitude, he whispers to his reflection, "I left the company, but never left her." It is a line heavy with meaning, a vow, a regret, a hope, echoing softly in the silence that follows. The fireworks fade, but the glow remains, a quiet reminder that some legacies live beyond walls and titles. The young woman stands by a vast window overlooking the city, the night stretching endlessly below her. She has given up everything, power, prestige, the relentless chase, to find something truer. Her gaze is steady, filled with quiet resolve. The skyline is alive with lights and motion, but her focus is inward, reflecting on the journey that brought her here. There is no regret, only acceptance and a newfound peace. Her silhouette is framed by the glow of distant stars and the hum of the city. She breathes deeply, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. She knows that this moment, this silence, marks not an end but a beginning. The empire she left behind is a chapter closed. What lies ahead is unwritten, fragile, hopeful, and hers to claim. In a quiet boardroom, the CEO's child now sits in the same chair once occupied by her father. Her expression is a mixture of determination and innocence, a symbol of hope and continuity. She looks out at the city through expansive windows, the weight of legacy resting lightly on her young shoulders. Though the empire is different now, fractured, fragile, reborn, the torch has been passed. The room is silent but full of promise. She is the future, unburdened by past mistakes, ready to lead with lessons learned. Her presence is a testament to resilience and renewal. The past may have fallen away, but the story continues in new hands, new dreams, and a new vision for what power can be. The chair, a symbol of authority, feels both heavy and hopeful beneath her. The final line lingers in the air, resonating through empty corridors and silent boardrooms. He left the company, but never left her. It's a truth wrapped in complexity, a reminder that legacy isn't just what is built, but what is carried forward. The empire may crumble, but the bonds forged through love and sacrifice remain unbroken. The CEO's journey, marked by triumph and tragedy, ends not with a grand finale but a quiet acknowledgement. It is a moment suspended in time, inviting reflection and emotion. The screen fades slowly to black, leaving viewers with a profound sense of loss and hope intertwined. It's a closing chapter that promises the story will continue, transformed, but alive, in the hearts and hands of those left behind. A small hand reaches up, grasping the armrest of the boardroom chair. It is the hand of a child, tentative but full of promise. This simple gesture speaks volumes. The legacy is not lost but reborn. The empire may have fallen, but the future waits in small hopeful moments like this. The child's grip tightens, a silent vow to carry forward the lessons learned. Though the past was marked by power struggles and sacrifices, what remains is a quiet determination to build something better. The screen holds on this tender image, fragile yet full of possibility. It is the perfect ending, a visual echo of the story's heart, that true legacy lives on not in walls or titles, but in those who dare to dream anew.